This is a show that brings to the forefront newsmakers, entertainers, and those making a difference in our lives and in our world. Each week is a new adventure with topics ranging from the most serious and cutting edge to the most lighthearted and entertaining.
This is Taking Care of Business with Richard Solomon.
Greetings, everyone. Richard Solomon from Fleet Week 2018. We're at the Kings Point Merchant Marine Academy with the Zephyr, and we're with some people from the Zephyr. Our first person is
Colin Collier. I'm the operations officer on board from Atlanta, Georgia, graduate of Naval Academy 2014.
Oh, hey, my roommate from Admiral Farragut Academy, Ken Liss, went to Annapolis. So I have my own copy of Reef Points from, I think, 1980-something. So there you go. How's the cow? There you go. That's an inside joke. Okay. All right. So great to meet you. You're also the XO, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. So that's great. Your name, sir?
EM2 Villegas, California.
What part of it? It's a big state.
Yeah, Los Angeles.
Oh, L.A. Perfect. There you go. So at least you're a little bit far away from home, but you must love the sea.
Yeah, it's pretty similar, big city, so it's pretty good.
All right. Well, first of all, welcome all of you to New York. And I know that you wear many hats, but your primary hat is?
Yeah, primary is electrician on board.
Right. And as we were saying in pre-production, on the USS Arlington, I passed all my electrical inspections. All my plugs are good. I could plug in. Yeah. And the year before, the Kearsarge said that was okay, and I have my stickers from there, too. So if you need, I can whip them all out. Okay. All right. See, I happen to really love the Navy. Okay. You, sir.
David Bevel. I'm a damage controlman first class. I'm from Mulberry, Florida, a little town outside of Lakeland and Tampa. And basically, I'm a firefighter on board the ship.
All right. Now, I understand from our XO here that everybody has multiple roles in the ship. Maybe we'll start with you. So when people, first of all, let me ask some basic questions. What is the standard complement of crew members on a ship like this?
We usually have about anywhere from 20 to 24 personnel on board, including officers and enlisted. So right now we're sitting at about 24 personnel. So we've got plenty of bodies on board. But for as far as my jobs go, sir, I kind of say whatever. I'm like the officer, whatever jobs they don't want, officer.
We have a lot of that in civilian life. Hey, Mikey, he doesn't. Yeah, Mike, you'll eat it.
That's right. That's what they say. Hey, Colin, do this. Okay. Like I said, I'm the operations officer, executive officer, in charge of navigation, combat systems officer, legal officer, MWR officer, or fund boss. Safety officer. I think these guys know more about my jobs than I do, to be honest. They remind me every day, hey, you're in charge of this. I forgot about that. But that's how it is on board here, and we make it happen.
All right. Now, you do all kinds of stuff, too. In fact, you actually drive the boat sometimes?
Yeah, I'm master helm, so I get to work the wheel here, kind of direct where the ship goes. I get orders from the con officer and pretty much drive for him, tells me where to go. So it's one of my jobs that I do other than being an electrician on board.
Right. Now, as far as damage control, let me ask you, there's got to be safety drills galore, and I have a feeling that in times of, let's say a drill, everybody who has some kind of role has probably some kind of other safety role to serve. So you may be an electrician during the day, but when the whistle blows or the bells go off, I have a feeling you have to do something else.
Yes, sir. It's always, especially with a crew this small, it's a lot of moving parts. Just like the daily events of the workload, like XO said and EM2 said, you got different jobs. So damage control, you may be doing, fighting a fire. Once that fire's out, you may have flooding, so then you're on a different team doing pipe patching or something else. I'm the acting DCA, damage control officer or whatever on board too. I'm supposed to help out and manage type of evolutions and whatever happens, but it's you got to go to the fight first, so it's kind of hard to cipher in between.
So I have a couple of questions about ship life. Because you're such a small crew, relatively speaking, are there shifts, or is it like basically you're really like almost always on and you get cat naps here and there?
So we have shifts. We're on 3-section watches, so you stand 2 4-hour watches a day. That's a circadian rhythm that the Navy has implemented that is got to make the Navy better, gives a chance for officers and enlisted to catch up on some sleep. We have training blocks, so we have set times during the days that Those are times allocated for training, and we have times allocated for maintenance. Anytime outside those blocks, your role in the ship is to sleep or stand watch. So it ensures that the sailors and officers and the crew of ships in the Navy are getting that 4, 5, 6 hour sleep that we need to do to be able to run effectively and efficiently out to sea.
Yeah, but okay, so when you have a few minutes, it's not like you can go out and take a drive somewhere or read a magazine. I'm sure this in the middle of the ocean. There's very few places to go lift weights, read a book. What do you do to sort of decompress a little bit?
So one of the things is we do try to work out on here. It's kind of hard with this ship being so small. It rocks a lot. But we do try to work out, try to maintain that physical. But other than that, you just try to relax, try to enjoy the day. Like XO said, when we're not on watch, we're either trying to get some rest or trying to do much training and maintenance that we can to try to get ready for our operation.
How does the food work? Let me ask you, how does the food work? Because they always say that the military lives on its stomach, and you can't have grumpy people with low sugar levels. How does the whole meal situation work?
Personally, out of all the ships I've been on, and I've been a few, I like the food here. I like the mess here. The Navy has gotten into a pretty much a set schedule, Monday through Friday. I mean, we kind of adhere to that here, but with it being such a small crew, it's more of a closed mess. So we can kind of decipher what we eat, and we get a little bit of leeway. But the food here is very good, and I mean, it's a refrigerator right there. It's kind of like a floating home. So if it's midnight, you get a little hungry, you can come get a little snack. There's some leftovers or something. So that's a lot better than the bigger ships where you really don't have that luxury, or it's pretty much a set schedule of what you're going to eat. So
I have a question. Let's say Richard Solomon is on board, right? Part of the crew. Because I want to, and I tend to eat a little bit more than other people. So if I start cutting into sort of the ration bay, how does that work?
Oh, you'll probably get some crap for it. No, that's what it is. We buy into the food, and whatever's not eaten needs to be eaten. If it's not eaten after a certain amount of time, our CS1, our culinary specialist, we'll throw it out. We can't keep food forever, so that's what we have to do. So it's there to be eaten.
Right. So how much of a supply of food do you have? Because you've gone on some very long journeys.
Yes, sir. So we typically have the storage up to 9 days. We can store up to 9 days of food. So we try to pack in as much dry stuff as possible. Obviously, with the fresh vegetables and stuff like that, you can't pack 9 days worth of fresh vegetables and stuff in there. So at 9 days capacity, it's more of the dry foods, the pastas and stuff, the breads and stuff like that. So that's the betterment of what we have.
So from stem to stern, what's the footage?
179 feet, sir.
So in that limited space where you have to have navigation and radar and weapons and sleeping quarters, what is sort of the kitchen facilities look like, and how much of there is what we know as traditional cooking as opposed to maybe grabbing a peanut butter sandwich?
So we have the traditional hey, there's some bread, go make yourself a PB&J down there, because that's. I will say the food on here is the best food I have in the Navy as well, but sometimes, hey, I don't like that, so I'm going to make a nice PB&J, and we have those options. We have one griddle downstairs because we have one CS1, so we don't need multiple griddles. He's able to cook everything right there for 25, 30 people we have on board. He cooks 3 meals a day. We have 2 refrigerators, 1 freezer. So we're able to store as much as we possibly can in that allocated space. And the engineers obviously keep those reefers and stuff up and running, so we're able to keep as much food to be able to stay on mission as much as possible.
So let me talk a little bit about the general mission of the ship. I understand this is a Cyclone class vessel, and it's a coastal patrol boat, right? Patrol
craft, yes, sir. And we are Cyclone class.
All right. So what is its basic mission for people who haven't sort of done the background research?
So we have the best mission in the Navy. We get to go down to the lovely Caribbean Sea and now Eastern Pacific Ocean and conduct counter-narcotic operations, so counter-drug operations. So we prevent drugs from wherever they may come from for entering the shores of the United States of America, and to include Puerto Rico.
That's got to be... So there's a big ocean out there, so... And there's only, 23, you guys. So you guys must be really, really busy, and you must have to really cover a lot of territory.
That's right. I've done two patrols on board here in the 9 months I've been on board. First patrol, we did 18,000 nautical miles in 75 days. And the second patrol, we did 13,000 nautical miles in 75 days. So since the time I've been on board, we've done upwards of 35,000 nautical miles in 9 months.
Right. To what extent do you have coordination with the Coast Guard? Because I know that the Coast Guard has a similar mission, at least in part. I mean, yeah, they have rescue and things like that too. But is there a lot of integration, or it's parallel?
So when we conduct our mission, we actually embark a Coast Guard law enforcement detachment. There'll be about 9 of their personnel come on board and conduct the mission with us. They conduct all the law enforcement, as the United States Navy is unable to do that. But also we work with a joint interagency task force based out of Key West, Florida. So that's a joint task force down there where there's Coast Guard officers, there's Navy officers, there's Air Force officers, Army officers enlisted, all sorts of stuff helping us be as successful as possible in the counter-narcotics operations, sir.
All right, so let's talk about, there was a very big drug bust that you had recently that was well known. It was, what was it, $20 million worth of cocaine?
Yes, sir.
Could you guys talk a little bit about that? Let me get you guys, you want to talk about it a little bit, or, just...
I just seen it on the news because I just checked on board, sir. So,
all right. Okay. So, why don't you talk about it a little bit?
All right. So, about a month ago, we were.
So for people, that was about April.
April.
Yeah,
sure.
2018.
Yes, sir. April. We were in the Eastern Pacific. With the help of an aircraft flying above, they spotted a potential drug runner. We intercepted that drug runner. At that time of interception, when they finally got eyes on us, it was a 70-foot low-profile vessel, similar to a sailing vessel, except you cut off the mast of a sailing vessel. It sits really low in the water, so it's not your typical, pleasure craft or fishing boat out here that you see kind of running around.
What was it powered by?
It was powered by 2 Yamaha 75 horsepower engines.
Okay.
So at that point, the suspected drug smugglers, because they were suspected at that point, saw us, got visual of us, cut the fuel lines and lit accelerants off to try to burn their low-profile vessel. At that point, it became a search and rescue mission because priority of life takes precedence over burning vessels and any kind of substance that was on board. We rescued those personnel, got them safely on board, had our doctor back there, our HM1, conduct all the kind of physical and medical checks on them to ensure that they were healthy and they were okay. At that point, they were okay, so we pulled Zephyr up alongside the low-profile vessel. It was on fire at this point. And about 90 minutes after fighting the fire, we were able to successfully put out the fire. And at that point, we saw all the contraband inside the hull of the vessel, and we took it all out, counted it all up, and totaled up to be about 1,000 pounds of cocaine, upwards of $20 to $22 million.
Wow. That's some story, and it was funny. One of the public affairs officers told me about that, and I figured that's a story that really needs to be told because that's really an important part of your mission. You're based out of Florida?
Yes, sir, Jacksonville, Florida.
Okay. So how often do you get to stay in home port, and how often are you basically out at sea?
So this ship has one of the most active ships in the U.S. Navy. It's been released from the Navy Times. So from August of 2017 to September of 2018, September of this year, the USS Zephyr will be underway for 222 of those days.
Wow.
Sure.
Wow. How do you guys get mail and things like that, because especially when you're out so much?
So the mail, we actually have to route a mailing instruction before. So anything that's forwarded to our regular mailing address in Jacksonville, Florida, we send out this message saying, here's our ports that we're going to be going to. We can't put out the dates of those ports, but we will be in these ports for kind of a time block. So if there's any kind of important parts, mail that we are supposed to get, they'll send it to that port. And if we pull into that port, they're in that time block, that's how we receive our mail out to sea.
So when the credit card company calls and say, how come you haven't paid? You say, it's confidential. It's classified.
Absolutely right. Yeah, we missed a lot of credit card bills and say we never got them because we never pulled in that port.
And you have a tremendous plausible deniability.
They can't never ask any
right,
questions.
that's right. And of course, since you're on the news once in a while, it's like they know, it's like the whole thing. Now, you talked a little bit about a medical officer. Is there a medical officer always on board?
He's not a medical officer, but he is
a medic?
Independent duty corpsman. He's an IDC, so he's a first-class petty officer. He's a hospital corpsman. And yes, sir, we are required to have one on board at all times.
Now, that must keep someone really busy, everything from little cuts and scrapes and, tummy aches to maybe, something much more, intense.
Yes, sir. Anything from, because this ship rocks and rolls quite a bit, so seasickness pills are a frequent candy we give out on board here. Because seasickness on the board here is nothing to be ashamed about. We don't have any major incidents on board where cuts and bruises and stuff like that. But anything, the HM1 is a very busy person. He's scheduling doctor's appointments. He's in charge of all of medical readiness and stuff of that nature.
My father served on the FS 221 between 1948 and 51, and he told me about one of his friends. His fellow crew members had appendicitis, and they actually had to slow the ship down, on the way to Europe to kind of do that thing. So what happens if you have a level of medical necessity like that? How does that work? And do you have to maybe get like a helicopter to like evac somebody?
So you want the appropriate answer, or you want to answer?
I want the appropriate answer. And then off mic, you'll tell me. The great thing about being here is that when we're done, you can tell me all the cool stuff, when we're not on the air.
So there's no inappropriate answer. I was just joking. The independent duty corpsman is able to do almost everything up to, major surgery, even minor surgery at that point. At that point, we will have to rush to the nearest location, nearest hospital that we've been tasked to run to. We were able to go 30-plus knots, so we can get pretty much anywhere within about 5 hours. We don't really operate anywhere 200, 300 miles off the coast anyway. So we're able to get to, 3 to 5 hours, we can pretty much get to where we want. We're able to do personnel sea lifts and stuff like that. It's a little dangerous because we're such a small ship, but in case of emergencies, we'll make things happen.
Could you tell me a little bit about the drone out there? Because I want a little bit more of a. But I saw the tour, and that was very interesting because that was also part of the drug interdiction that you were a part of.
Yes, sir. So we have a UAV, a drone, as most people like to call them. It's an unmanned aircraft. We call it Puma, Puma. We use that for force protection overwatch and also for intelligence gathering. I call it a paper airplane because it's similar to that. You fold up an airplane in class, you throw it across to your buddy across the class saying, hey, let's go play basketball after class. Other than we don't write personal notes on this thing. We do launch it similar to a paper airplane where you actually take it and you throw it off the ship just like that, and it'll go up and it'll fly. It has the ability to kind of give us a range of about 46 nautical miles off our visibility of our radar. So it kind of helps us out with that. And the ability to capture what we can't really see visually, so it gives us eyes out even further, so over the horizon kind of radar.
Wow, that's really cool. Hi, this is Richard Solomon from the USS Zephyr. We'll be right back. Keep it locked here, and we'll be right back.
Hi, this is Rory Cosgrove, and you're listening to Rich Solomon on WCWP 88.1 FM.
Richard Solomon from the USS Zephyr. Welcome back. We are at Fleet Week 2018. We're at the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy in Kings Point, New York, right in our listening zone, and we are with
QMC Harry Warner.
All right. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
All right. So one of the questions I always like to know is the meaning behind the symbolism and, I guess, logos and insignia. So let's take a look at these two items. I guess let's start with this one first. This is your your trademark.
Yes, this is the actual our home logo, the 8-baller logo, as we like to call it. So it's simply just a monograph of our ship that's been pretty much characterized into a war-fighting ship. With the jagged teeth, throwing the 8-ball grenade.
Kind of reminds me of Roadrunner.
Absolutely, and it outlines our warfighting capabilities. Pound for pound, the Zephyr, even though she's only about 180 feet long, heavily armed. If you were to look at larger warships, you have weapon systems on board there, but not in such tight compaction as you would see on a Zephyr. We do have the forward and aft Mark 38 gun weapon systems, which have the coaxial Mark 240 gun on it also. So it shoots not only the 25 millimeter round, but can also shoot the 7.62 millimeter round as well at a higher rate. And then also we have on each bridge wing, our armaments as well. So those light machine guns and medium caliber machine guns. On the flip side of the coin, we have that logo, and then on the reverse we have the Zephyr Crest itself. And just like any other Navy ship, it has its symbolisms. Every PC at the top of the crest has the anchor with the crossed lightning bolts. This is indicative of our naval superiority as U.S. Navy assets, and also our electronic warfare capabilities. Intelligence gathering via electronic warfare, and our radar superiority for electronic navigation. So you'll see that on every PC crest in the fleet. Just below that, you'll see the trident and crossed saber behind the shield. The trident is indicative of the PC's first employment as a special operations deployable unit. We were originally tasked with fast insertion extraction of special operations teams, and that trident is indicative of that. We don't quite do that these days. We're mainly an interdiction operations unit for counter-narcotics, but we still hold that history. A lot of what we do, we still take on special operations units to do that mission from the Coast Guard. And then the Sabre is our warfighting capability once again, how we're just a fast-striking ship. We're able to go into the fight and be extremely capable. The shield is indicative of our, and it's blue and white for purity and loyalty, but that's indicative of our ability to protect assets, as we are a high-value asset escort in some cases.
Oh, could you give me an example of that? It doesn't have to be very specific, but just
absolutely,
generally.
Yeah. Out in the Fifth Fleet area of operation, we do a lot of that escort operations. So we'll take, say, a high-value tanker that's going up to an oil field to get millions and millions of dollars worth of product on board. They need to be safely escorted through a narrow strait where there might be somebody trying to do damage or harm to that vessel.
So terrorism, piracy, that kind of thing?
Terrorism, piracy, anything like that. And we're tasked with escorting those vessels that are not as capable of defending themselves as we would be around it. So that's what that is indicative of. And then you have, at the forefront of the shield, behind the Griffin, you have a compass. On the original crest, the western point of the compass would be red. And if you look on the side of our covers, we have the god Zephyr. As our namesake would suggest, Zephyr is the west wind.
Oh, I had no. That's really fascinating.
Every PC in the fleet is named after a weather phenomenon. The typhoon, Scirocco is a type of wind, the monsoon. We're the Zephyr. The Zephyr is the west wind. So we're a westerly wind. So that's what the compass is going to be colored red there on the western point. But the compass as a whole is indicative of our navigation superiority. We've just been upgraded to electronic navigation, so we don't use paper charts anymore. And it's very automated and integrated into our other bridge command systems. So that's what that represents. And then at the front, you have the Golden Zephyr.
But what does a Zephyr look like?
Sorry, not the Golden Zephyr, the Golden Griffin.
Oh, okay. But what do Griffins and Zephyrs look like?
So a Griffin is essentially a lion's body with wings and pretty much an eagle's head.
Okay.
So it's a mythical creature, but that symbolizes our ability to use intelligence and pretty much just outright smarts and tactical prowess to interdict and engage terrorism, narco-terrorism, and narcotics with the use of our radar systems and UAVs and other things. That's where the Griffin comes in.
So you guys deal with all the bad guys out there. I mean, like literally, the drug dealers, the drug runners, the terrorists, the pirates. I mean, the whole gamut of bad actors.
Yeah, our primary mission is definitely just counter narcotics. but sometimes we'll be out there if the opportunity arises. We are always ready and capable to combat narco-terrorism or piracy, things of that nature. The assets that we have in the 5th Fleet AOR out in the Middle East, they still do a lot of that. Counter personnel trafficking. They do high-value asset escort. They do counter piracy. And they also do pretty much just health and comfort. They'll go up to vessels out there and they'll make sure that those guys are doing okay. There's a lot of fishing vessels out there that are in legitimate business. They're not out there to do any harm to anything. They're just out there trying to do their job. And they'll do approaches to them, bring bottles of water, sometimes food and supplies out there.
Suntan lotion.
Suntan lotion.
Sunblock.
Hats. Sometimes gloves, because those guys do fishing and they need gloves, leather gloves. And on top of that, we make sure that not only are they doing okay as a vessel, but have they had any problems with piracy? And that's just the networking part of what we do. And that also goes into that griffin that we have on the front of our symbol. So we don't quite as much do it out in the Caribbean. We don't see as many vessels. But a lot of times we will come upon a fishing vessel that is in need. And we have capable people on board to help them fix engineering problems and things like that. We had that this last patrol, where our engineers actually assisted in the repair of a vessel that just needed some help. But all of that goes into the symbolism, if you will, of that crest, and we embody that.
So, like, let's say I'm a craft out there, and I don't know, for some reason my systems are down or whatever, and I'm just floating around. At some point, does someone find out, and maybe they try to get a message to someone, and then you'll get contacted, or is it more like during the course of your patrols, you come upon people who may be stranded because they couldn't, get self-assistance?
We have had derelict vessels that were unmanned, where we'd never know where that person went. But a lot of times we will get over the radio. If an individual is in distress, they will use that radio system as a distress beacon, and other vessels will hear it, and then they'll feed it along the line to a capable vessel that's able to render assistance. For sure.
So you're a quartermaster.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what does that entail? Because most of us don't really know what quartermaster's supposed to make. There's all these names, but they're just, to the civilian population, we're lost on that.
Right. So outside of the Navy, a quartermaster in another military branch would be somebody charged with supply and logistics.
My father did that in the Army. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
But here in the Navy, the quartermaster is charged with the safe navigation of the ship, planning, cartography, getting from point A to point B without encountering a hazard to navigation. So we're the subject matter experts and work directly under the navigator and the captain to make sure that this ship gets to where it needs to go in a safe manner, navigation-wise. We conform to the applicable rules of the road for the area to make sure that we're adhering to maritime law, and we do all of the track planning, all of the voyage planning, navigation planning that goes into that. We utilize Voyage Management System. It's an automated chart system, and run the updates via that. And the captain puts his trust in us to make sure that system always works and is always at the top of its game, because we also use that to do our targeting. It talks to our radar systems, and we're able to make sure that we can safely navigate the waters, not just on a hazard to navigation standpoint, but a hazard to shipping. So we're able to see that on our charts now. It's automatically plotted on there via the radar and the automated identification system. It feeds into that too. So we're able to clear the track for shipping and do contact management and shipping avoidance with that system as well.
As a backup to all the electronics, do you still rely upon sort of the old analog methods just as a safety precaution?
We do have paper charts still, and we still have to employ, as a backup, celestial navigation. So we still look to the stars.
Take out a sextant and look.
We'll still employ a sextant, and we'll still plot our position using CellNav, which is, I'm glad the Navy has not done away with that, because if it ever boiled down to it, that is the most fail-safe method of navigation. That's why it's thousands of years old.
So what exact could you describe with that? Like a sextant, we know that is something that triangulates the stars, so you figure out where you are in relationship to the sky.
In essence, yes, because your celestial sphere is just like the Earth. It's just been broadcasted out to the stars. So our celestial sphere, it has an equator. It has a celestial equator, and any object in the sky's distance from that equator is what's called a declination. Where our distance from the equator is a latitude, well, they don't have that in space. They don't have that in the sphere. So we have that, and then we measure its distance from Aries. So we're able to get, and then we're able to derive our longitude, time-wise, and then we're able to derive from declination a latitude. So we're able to pretty much just pinpoint our position with various stars.
That's really fascinating. You during the tour that preceded when I came aboard, you were talking about a drone, and it was a fascinating thing. Can you tell me about the drone that you have out there?
Yes, we utilize the Puma Uav, or unmanned aerial vehicle. It's got about a 6-foot wingspan. It's got a flight ceiling of just under 15,000 feet. Once it gets up to 15,000 feet on a good day, it'll start to tell us, "Hey, I'm a little
tired. I'm a little tired."
And it's limited to that. A little bit of FAA regulation goes into that, but it's got a range of about 5 kilometers, about 5,000 meters from the ship. If it does fall out of the signal window, it'll automatically kick into home, and it'll start flying back to us until it gets a signal back. So, and if we still don't have a signal, it'll fly directly above the ship and just loiter up there until we figure out what's going on, or we can land it. The landing pad being the water. It doesn't have a landing gear, but it is...
because you have no place to land it on the ship.
Right, our ship just doesn't have the real estate for a fixed-wing aircraft to land on, so it's completely waterproof. Even that high-speed, high-tech camera it's got underneath it, all of it's waterproof, and we're able to pretty much just crash it right into the water, pick it right up, and keep going.
So it's waterproof and shockproof.
It's waterproof, shockproof.
Weatherproof, I guess.
And even if it does strike the ship by mishap, it's still just fine. That thing can take a beating and keep on going.
But when you think about that, 15,000 feet, how many miles is that?
15,000 feet, that's just under 3 miles.
That is a staggering, 3 miles.
When you look at a Boeing 767 or whatever, or 737, they've got a ceiling of about 36,000 feet for cruise altitude. And you look up and all you see is a tiny speck in the air. Well, that's a huge aircraft, and this is on about a 1/30th scale here, 1 to 30th scale of that aircraft size. And it doesn't have the emissions that larger aircraft would put out, because it's an electronic motor. And also it doesn't have, it has to conform to FAA as far as lighting is concerned, but when we're running covert, we can turn those lights off. So it's not heard, it's not seen.
So it's real stealthy.
Makes it very stealthy, and it makes it an extremely, extremely effective method of gathering imagery and intelligence for us.
So you're in the tour, you were explaining to the participants that the drone that was used in the last drug interdiction was used to surveil a low-profile vessel, and that you're able to see that there were indeed drugs being transported, and then that intel was used. Could you talk about that?
Yes. So when we do get that imagery,
is that instantaneous? Like you can actually see what's going on?
Yes, it has a direct feedback to our ship. Wow. So the operator is actually looking at what the camera is seeing at all times, and that's how he flies that aircraft. One of the modes that it has is wake detection. So it's able to home in on a craft that's moving through the water and then target that wake and fly on its own from there and just follow the wake of the object that it's going on. And it'll be able to just click imagery. And we'll reach back to entities, if you will, the Coast Guard, and they will say, okay, because we can't just go out there and say, that boat right there, we're going to board it. That's a big no-no. That vessel has the same rights as we do as a vessel. And you can't just go lumbering onto a ship or a boat and just start boarding it and invading them like that. That's piracy in its own essence. So we would, in turn, send that stuff back. Now, we would get the right to approach the vessel at that point. And based on evidence, photographic evidence, and reasonable suspicion, we can then say, okay, well, this vessel's pretty...
Your probable
pretty darn
cause.
suspicion. So, hey, we really, really recommend to board it. And then that's when we get the green light to go ahead and do that.
So who does the boarding? Do you do the boarding? Does the Coast Guard do the boarding?
Right. So we take on that Coast Guard asset, and then we'll do the boarding. But we're not just a delivery system for that Coast Guard asset. We're also the targeting group for them. Their main job is to do the boardings, and that's what they should have their mindset as. So it's our job to make sure that they're focusing on that, and we're focusing on the intelligence targeting and information gathering.
Right. All right, this is Richard Solomon. We're with Quartermaster, Chief Quartermaster Warner on the USS Zephyr, Fleet Week 2018. We'll be right back in just a couple of seconds. Keep it locked in.
Hi, this is the Great Thordini. You're listening to Richard Solomon on 88.1 FM WCWP.
This is Richard Solomon with Chief Quartermaster Warner on the USS Zephyr, Fleet Week 2018 from the Kings Point Merchant Marine Academy in Kings Point, Long Island. And we're just having a phenomenal conversation about the history and mission of the USS Zephyr. And one of the things that we didn't get a chance to really talk about was sort of the number of different firsts of this vessel.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Thanks for having me back. So Zephyr, one of the few PCs that can boast or tout those firsts. We are the first ship to go through the Panama Canal as a Navy PC.
And PC is what?
Patrol coastal craft, so or patrol coastal combatant. And once we got through the Panama Canal as the first Navy PC, we were the first to be in the Eastern Pacific as a Navy PC. And then also the first PC, just PC, because these ships were also given to the Coast Guard for a little bit. The Coast Guard actually came through the Panama Canal, but we can't count that. But also the first PC to go south of the equator. And that was, the Navy has a crossing the line ceremony tradition, and we were able to enjoy that and get that ceremony under our belts. A lot of sailors on PCs don't even know what a crossing the line ceremony is, and we also got to do it with the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard's not too familiar or savvy on that either, so it was a lot of fun. Had a lot of fun doing that. Also, the first PC this is the first ship in naval history to interdict a low-profile drug smuggling vessel, which is a vessel that's been fabricated, pretty much a panga, which is a go-fast boat, fabricated into a low-profile vessel that can run very low to the water, very hard to see on radar, and very hard to see from the sky. And they're able to make a pretty good speed through the water because of that low profile, and they can hold quite a bit of narcotics. So we had the divine pleasure of doing that and being the first to do that, and get more of those drugs out of the circulation and out of people's hands.
So which brings to mind the question: you seize the drugs. Where do they actually go? Do you have like a special evidence locker? Do you keep the chain of custody and all that other stuff? You have to video, and so how does that work? Because as a lawyer, you have to.
There's a lot of legal. And you're on here, and you can see the vast amount of space we have right now. Not really. So we don't have a lot of deck space, and we don't have a lot of internal storage space for that bulk of drugs that come on board. So we have to storm topside. They stay tarped over and out of the weather as best as possible. And there's constant 24/7 watch on it, armed watch, so that nobody gets near it, because cocaine not only is a narcotic that people can get high on, it's a hazard. It's a hazard to human health.
I'm sure it's also a hazard to sea life if it got into the water.
And that's another thing. So we have to make sure that it stays sealed up and it doesn't get wet and then dissolve into and then get washed over onto the deck and into the water, into the sea, because it is it's purified with fuel, with gasoline or kerosene. So it's that right there alone is a hazard to sea life. So knowing that, we have to keep it sealed up and keep it from breaking down on deck.
Is that why you can't tow it?
Well, the vessels that we get the drugs out of, really, it's just a logistical hazard for us to tow. It could damage the equipment on board our ship, and we're not really equipped to tow things like that. And in the end, it's really just going to damage that vessel too. So in order for us to keep that vessel from being a hazard to navigation, at that point, we would sink the vessel with of course, certain permissions. That's other legal implications are involved in that. But we make sure that it sinks completely so that it's not a hazard to navigation for other vessels that are transiting through that area in legitimate trade.
So as a lawyer, I ask this as a lawyer question, who do you get the legal advice from? Is it like a JAG person? Is it how does it work? Because I can see these are all very complicated legal issues. You got environmental hazards, you got chain of custody issues, you have probable cause issues, and I guess you have to make sure that when you have a narcotics interdiction of such a magnitude, you want to make sure it all sticks.
Right. When it's broken down into maritime law, we do use the Judge Advocate General, and every branch of the military has its own legal team and its own lawyers. So we reach back to our specific Coast Guard district, and they then reach back to that lawyer or that law system, that team of lawyers that work together to make sure that what we're doing out here is not breaking any rules, for lack of better words.
So like on TV, are you on the phone with prosecutors and lawyers, on the phone, basically, as everything's happening in real time?
Well, from here, the scope is pretty short. We always have on hand, via the internet, via certain other communication capabilities, we're able to reach back to the first step in that legal process, which is our Coast Guard district. The guys on shore that handle all of the logistics support and all the intelligence support for us. And they will then reach back to their lawyers, and then they'll just up the chain, down the chain for us. And it's a pretty quick turnaround. They're pretty good on the floor, and they get that answer back to us pretty darn quick.
Because in civilian life, people complain they can never get their lawyer on the phone.
Yeah, and everybody always complains about the whole red tape thing. So we don't really have to cut a lot of that. That's their job back on shore. We're doing the feet on the ground thing. They can do the paperwork stuff back there. So,
all right, so let's say you have the narcotics on board and you come to your home port or wherever you're going. What happens to the drugs? Does it go into like an evidence locker or some kind of armored facility? How does that work? Especially if it's $20 million worth.
So any narcotics that enters the U.S. is subject to the pretty much intrusive nature of the DEA, and rightfully so. When we do the disposition of those narcotics, it's going through our particular Coast Guard entity, and it's getting then transferred over to the DEA for appropriate destruction or secure storage.
Right.
So once it leaves our hands, we're dusting off our feet from that and moving on to the next case. But we do take it very seriously to make sure that illegal product gets into the right hands as expeditiously as possible, so that, one, we're not storing a hazard on board, and two, so that this case can pretty much be followed through with. Because part of the prosecution of the people that were smuggling it, that's one of the major parts right there.
Oh yeah, Exhibit A.
Yeah, Exhibit A. Now it's a tangible thing. Now it's a seeable thing to the court of law that they're being tried under.
Right now. Or all the prosecutions in the United States, or they could be done anywhere, depending on the circumstances.
So there's the extradition process. I'm not really going to go too far into that.
Just for general, Miami Vice never talked about any of this stuff.
Exactly, yeah. So in a nutshell, they're going to be tried in the U.S. court of law. Okay, but they will be treated as a
suspect
from any other country, and treated as such.
And given the appropriate rights.
Appropriate rights to a speedy trial. They still have rights to a lawyer. They still have all of the rights that any other human being should have. And at that point, they're only a suspect. They're not guilty until they're proven so. So they're given those appropriate rights.
Now, I assume, and again, this is just an assumption, I assume that when you're dealing with some big-time drugs, you're also dealing with some big-time weapons. Is that something that you have to deal with? And then how does that work
And
as far as a weapon seizure?
Right, and that's when we enter into the realm of, is this just narcotics interdiction, or is this counter-narcotic terrorism? Or narco-terrorism is what we would generally call it. When you introduce weapons from a smuggler into that equation, that's when it starts entering narco-terrorism grounds. And we don't generally see that down there. But we always keep that in the back of our minds as far as, okay, we're going to run up on this vessel at high speed. We only know that there is a suspicious or a reason to believe that there are drugs on board. But we don't know the scope of that. We don't know if there's also each one of those suspects carrying a weapon, maybe medium caliber weapon or high capacity weapon. We don't know that. But we always have to be prepared to react to that. And in all of the interdictions that the Coast Guard has had, they've had personal use armament, but nothing to the capacity of they want to do massive harm to something else. Generally, they've got that out there as a personal protective item, but whenever they get a military asset approaching them, they're hands up. They don't really put up too much of a fight, mainly because, and this is just, a thing of discussion that has gone around, is these individuals that are smuggling these drugs, they're getting paid practically nothing to do it. They're not getting paid a lot of money to do it. They're being told probably certain things from the people that are telling them to go ahead and do this, that there would be certain implications if they did not succeed. And when a military asset does roll up on them like that, their will to continue doing what they're doing generally goes out the window. They're pretty compliant, cooperative, and really don't give us too much of a fuss. And they know that they're going to be treated right when they get on board. They know that they're going to get proper medical care if it's required, the proper sanitation facilities when they're required, and sleeping quarters, the appropriate nutrition when they get here. And because, once again, they are suspects. They're not guilty when they come on board. So they are human beings still. They get those basic human rights just like we do.
Is there like a jail cell on board? Or something that like a holding?
No, and like I said, when we do these interdictions, the second we get an interdiction done, we're heading back to a port so that we can get these suspects off of our ship, because we don't have the appropriate capacity to keep people on board for days and days and days. So we get them on board. They're topside, but it's all tented in, so they're in a tent.
Are they cuffed?
Down there, they are cuffed.
Okay.
One, for their own safety, because when the ship starts rocking, they're sitting on the deck and they're cuffed. They do get up during the day and they walk around. They have the blankets and everything. Down in the Caribbean, it's warm during the day and it's mild at night. It never gets really cold. So we have the capacity to do that down there. If it was up here, up north, cold, we'd have to bring them inside because it's just too darn cold. But even at night, they still get blankets, they still get cots and things like that, so that their living conditions are pretty comparable to anybody that's inside the skin of the ship. Because they get the same amount of meals and they're always hydrating and they're walking around during the day. When the seas get rough, even the sailors on the ship, they got to go to their racks. It's a hazard to walk around the ship. So that's just one of the things. We just don't have the capacity to keep them on board for multiple days at a time. So right when we get that bust, we get into port, get them off the ship safely, and get them into the appropriate entity's hands.
So in the few minutes that we have left, let's talk about ship life, eating, sleeping, food, and we touched a little bit, but from your perspective, you just give me a little bit about what that's like for you.
This ship right here, the PC life, completely different from what you would see on a bigger platform, on a bigger ship. On a bigger ship, you'll have 300 plus sailors on board, and you can't really call that a family. You have to have family thought, you have to have family think, because you guys have to work as a team. But on here, our small crew, we know things about each other that you wouldn't be able to know about another shipmate on another ship, because we do have that group think and that family mentality on here. We're a very closely knit team, and it really plays out when it comes down to doing an operation. We share the same drive, motivation, and tight-knittedness to where we can trust everything everybody's doing wholeheartedly. So that sets us apart from the bigger ships by a mile. We're doing things on this small ship that destroyers could only dream of doing, and we're doing it extremely effectively and swiftly. So where they're doing it with
big iron,
300 sailors, and we're doing it with a tenth of that. So it's crazy to think like that, but it's pretty awesome to watch. And you're asking me about
eating and sleeping and that kind of stuff.
Food and the sleep. Our racks are the same size as any other ship. A little bit smaller in berthing size or sleeping quarter size than your bigger ships. But the food, top notch. We have one cook on board, and he is charged.
Do you call him Cookie?
And we call him Cookie. He is the cook. He does a lot of cooking. He's off the watch bill because of that. He cooks 3 meals a day for up to 39 people every day, and he does it in a small kitchen. I mean,
what are your favorite meals?
Oh, I don't have a least favorite meal on here. Since we're a private mess, we put in our own money. We get BAS for that. He can go out to Sam's Club, Costco, Super Walmart, and buy the food that we like. But he cooks it and he makes sure there's plenty of healthy options, salads, lean meats, great protein items, and he's just top notch. He's from Georgia, Southern cooking at its finest, and he just never disappoints us.
How are the grits?
The grits are amazing.
I can only imagine.
I've never had, even at really, really good Southern restaurants, I've never had grits like the ones he makes. They're amazing.
How are the biscuits and gravy?
He does biscuits from scratch every now and again, but he's pretty good with the Pillsbury too. But he does his gravy from scratch, and it's a Southern gravy, and it is bar none.
See, this alone will drive recruitment.
Oh, absolutely! Yeah, this should drive it through the roof. Yeah, it's amazing though.
In the last minute or so that we have, is there anything that we didn't discuss that people really need to know about either the ship life, its mission, its accomplishments?
I think we covered quite a bit. I will say that we are the Fourth Fleet's only operational Navy asset for counter-narcotics. Now, there are plenty of Coast Guard assets down there, but that alone being said is pretty paramount. There's a lot of focus on that. To say that this small crew is able to do what it does and do it day in, day out, is something right there to be said. It's an absolute pleasure to be on board with this kind of crew.
And one last question. So I understand you have a famous relative.
Oh,
yeah.
That's my great uncle.
Your great uncle was
born in Fredericksburg, Texas. Fleet Admiral Nimitz,
right?
Chester Nimitz. So I didn't find this out until about my 3rd year in the Navy.
Is that right?
Yeah, and that was my grandmother, who was also born in Fredericksburg. We still have property up in Fredericksburg, Texas, and she alluded that to me. We have a family tree hanging in her house in a picture frame, and she started going down that family tree, and lo and behold, one of those branches had the Nimitz family in it. And there's actually a Nimitz museum in Fredericksburg, Texas, if you ever get the chance to go down there. It's pretty amazing.
Oh, maybe I'll send them the tape with your great uncle's signature on it and put it as part of the museum. That was the interview we had with Milton Pike. What was that like? What was that like to see that document?
That was an eye-opener. To see an original declaration of surrender. That was something else.
All right, so this is Richard Solomon. I want to thank everybody, Chief Quartermaster Warner, the whole crew, everybody here for your hospitality and your kindness, your generosity, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for listening.